from Assemblymember Russell and relates to the zero carbon target.
Thank you, Chair. We're in the midst of a climate emergency, and the consequences of exceeding the 1.5 degrees Celsius average temperature across the globe are significant. That's why my team has produced one of the most ambitious climate change action plans of any major world city. It's one of the first to be compatible with the highest ambition of the Paris Agreement of limiting global average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. It includes stretching carbon budgets, and its implementation will see London become zero carbon by 2050. This is far more ambitious than central government. Our pioneering strategy is underpinned by detailed data on London's buildings and energy systems to demonstrate how a zero carbon target can actually be achieved. I'm doing everything I can within my powers, including setting up a £500 million fund to invest in energy efficiency in the capital. Our £34 million Energy for Londoners programme will help make London's homes warm, healthy and affordable, its workplaces more energy efficient, and supply the capital with more local clean energy. Our New London plan goes further than national government policy by making sure all new buildings will meet our zero carbon objectives. However, our plan highlights that as Mayor, I only have powers to deliver less than half the emission cuts required to make London zero carbon. The rest is down to national government. City Hall simply doesn't have the funding or the powers it needs. For example, government has minimum energy efficiency standards for rental properties, but the policies are riddled with loopholes and they're not properly enforced. Government needs to devolve powers to set building energy efficiency standards so we can improve and enforce them. London's been chronically underfunded for a decade. The government needs to acknowledge this and give us our fair share of energy company obligation funding.
Thank you, and I want to thank you for listening to the Greens and to this Assembly in taking the decision to declare a climate emergency. And I agree you've got one of the most ambitious climate action plans of any world city, and I also agree that you don't currently have the powers that you need. As you say, you can only get to half of what's actually got to be able to happen. Now, I just wanted to ask you about the difference between your London Environment Strategy and your zero carbon London plan. Sort of what's different in your new zero carbon plan compared to the original strategy?
I think what we set out in the plan we published, you mean the one published in December?
Yeah.
In the plan published in December is the additional powers that we would need. So what we did is we outlined in the strategy actions to make London zero carbon in a 60% reduction on 99 levels by 2030 and nearly 80% reduction on 99 levels by 2040, in line with the IPCC's recommendation. The plan we published sets out possible costs of achieving decarbonisation, and it set out what the costs were going to be.
So, Mr. Mayor, can I halt you there? It covers the costs that are different, it covers the powers that you need, but it's still working to 2050, which you also confirmed in your initial thing. Now,
but it's very important because it covers the modelling and the analysis.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So it's done much more. It's done more of the work, and that's really helpful. But it is still working to 2050. Now, the science tells us we could reach 1.5 degrees warming by 2030. That's just 12 years away. It was the basis for the Assembly motion, and it's 20 years earlier than the 2050 target. So are you planning to back up this very good extra analysis with further analysis so that you can scope out the scale of what's got to happen if we were to meet a 2030 target? Are you planning that? So it's so that you can ask the government for what you need. Sure. You say you don't have the powers. If you don't know what's needed to get to 2030...
Sorry, this is not a secret. We do know what's needed. So look,
you know what's needed for 2050 to be 1.5 compatible, but not for 2030.
Well, the government's not even getting to 2050, now in 2030, so it's one step at a time. So look, so the first thing, look, there's a number of points you raised. So I'm glad you accept, because it's really important for this to be agreed, that we in City Hall only have powers to deliver less than half the emission cuts required to make London zero carbon. That's very important acceptance that we need to accept. But we know what we need from government in relation to national policy, in relation to regulation, in relation to economic incentives, in relation to funding. My point is, we've made clear to government what's needed to get there by 2050, which they're not doing. So of course we can do the work in relation to what's needed by 2030, and that work's taking place. But the point is the government aren't even doing what's needed by 2050, let alone 2030.
The government are completely
Okay,
hopeless.
No,
you definitely
no,
need...
Assemblymember Russell, your time is up.